We've been told that neutrality is the highest virtue. That the more objective you are, the closer you are to truth. But here's the paradox. Sometimes, the claim of neutrality doesn't bring us closer to reality, it pushes us further away. Think about it. In a conflict where one side is lying and the other is telling the truth, treating both as equally valid isn't fairness. It's deception. Neutrality becomes a mask, a moral shield, for avoiding the discomfort of choosing sides. History is littered with examples. Newspapers that refused to take a stance on human rights abuses because they were just reporting facts. Scientists who presented climate denial and climate science as equal perspectives in the name of balance. Teachers who insisted on teaching both sides of proven science, as if the truth were up for a popularity vote. And the public, we often mistake this kind of false balance for intellectual sophistication. We respect the commentator who refuses to get emotional, forgetting that detachment isn't the same as insight. This video will dismantle the myth of neutrality. We'll explore how the illusion of objectivity can be used as a weapon to stall action, to muddy facts, and to let lies survive under the banner of fairness. By the end, you'll see why pretending to be above the fight can be the most dangerous position of all. Chapter 1: The Seduction of Objectivity. From childhood, we are taught to admire the person who can see both sides. In school, it's the classmate who mediates an argument without taking a side. In the workplace, it's the colleague who stays above the drama. And in public life, it's the journalist who delivers the news in a perfectly even tone, untouched by emotion. This image of the calm, measured observer is deeply appealing and deeply ingrained. It speaks to something primal in us, the desire for safety. When emotions are high, when arguments get heated, the one who appears detached radiates control. That control looks like wisdom. It feels like truth. But objectivity is not immune to illusion. The cultural worship of neutrality often blinds us to the ways it can be misused. We mistake the performance of impartiality for the practice of truth-seeking. The result? We elevate those who can sound balanced, even when their balance is manufactured. History shows us how seductive this can be. The news anchors of the mid-20th century became icons not for being right, but for sounding even-handed. Politicians who spoke in calm, non-committal tones were rewarded with trust, even when their policies were morally indefensible. We don't question the objective voice because it reassures us. It allows us to believe that truth is being delivered without bias, without agenda. But here's the trap: neutrality, as a performance, can be the easiest way to smuggle in bias, because it hides it under the cloak of fairness. And that's where the seduction becomes dangerous. Chapter 2: The Myth of the Middle Ground. We are told that the truth is always somewhere in the middle, that in every disagreement, the safe, sensible, enlightened position is to split the difference. It sounds reasonable. If two people are arguing, one saying it's raining, the other saying it's sunny, it feels balanced to assume it's partly cloudy. But reality doesn't bend to our desire for compromise. Sometimes, one side is simply wrong. This belief in the middle ground is one of the most enduring myths in public discourse. It stems from our discomfort with conflict. Taking a side feels risky. It invites criticism, alienation, and responsibility. By planting ourselves in the middle, we signal fairness and protect our social standing. But here's the problem: when the middle position is treated as inherently virtuous, it becomes a breeding ground for false equivalence. If a doctor says smoking causes cancer and a lobbyist says it doesn't, balancing their claims isn't balance, it's misinformation. It presents truth and falsehood as equally credible. History is littered with moments when the middle ground wasn't moral ground at all. During the civil rights movement, many Americans claimed to be neutral, condemning both activists and segregationists equally. In practice, this neutrality helped sustain the very systems activists were fighting to dismantle. The middle ground feels safe because it shields us from choosing. But safety doesn't always align with truth. In fact, when one side is committed to distortion, compromise becomes complicity. The hard truth: sometimes finding the truth means leaving the middle entirely. Chapter 3: The Weaponization of Neutrality. Neutrality sounds like a virtue, but in the wrong hands, it's a weapon. Power structures, governments, corporations, media conglomerates have long understood that they don't always need to win an argument. They just need to convince the public that the truth is still up for debate. This is the art of manufacturing doubt. If you can't disprove your opponent, you can at least slow them down by demanding more evidence, calling for balanced coverage, or insisting both sides deserve to be heard. To the average listener, this sounds reasonable. In practice, it dilutes urgency, erodes consensus, and buys time for those benefiting from the status quo. Take the tobacco industry in the mid-20th century. Internal research showed smoking caused cancer, but public relations campaigns demanded more studies. They framed scientists' warnings as one perspective in a debate. The appearance of objectivity, endless panels, dueling experts, open discussions, kept millions smoking and billions in profits flowing. Corporations are not alone. Politicians use the same tactic to stall reforms. By framing urgent crises as complex issues with no clear answers, they appear thoughtful while avoiding action. Media outlets, fearing accusations of bias, give equal airtime to fringe theories alongside well-established facts, a practice that misleads more than it informs. When neutrality is weaponized, it doesn't just obscure the truth, it actively protects lies. And the most dangerous part, those using it rarely look like villains. They look like the calm, reasonable adults in the room. Chapter 4: Emotional Detachment as a Liability. We've been taught that emotion is the enemy of reason. That to truly think clearly, we must strip away feeling and rely solely on logic. This belief runs deep in academia, journalism, science, and even everyday arguments. But what if emotional detachment, the hallmark of true objectivity, isn't always a strength? Neuroscience tells us something counterintuitive. Emotion isn't separate from rational thought, it's a vital part of it. The brain's decision-making centers are wired to integrate feeling with fact. When patients suffer damage to the emotional centers of the brain, they can process data but struggle to make even simple choices. Without emotion, there's no urgency, no prioritization, no human context. The obsession with cold objectivity can strip urgency from life or death issues. Consider climate change. Scientists who communicate with detached precision may be technically correct, but their lack of emotional resonance fails to move people to act. By contrast, passionate voices, while sometimes criticized for bias, often mobilize public awareness and policy change. We've seen this in humanitarian crises, too. Reports that calmly state 10,000 displaced rarely stir action. But an image of a single crying child, paired with a plea from a visibly shaken aid worker, can move nations to open their borders. This doesn't mean emotion should replace evidence. It means emotion should inform how evidence is communicated. Emotional detachment may feel safe, but in situations demanding moral clarity and human compassion, it becomes a liability. The truth isn't just something we know, it's something we feel enough to act on. Chapter 5: When Objectivity is Genuine. Critiquing false neutrality doesn't mean rejecting the concept of objectivity altogether. Real objectivity exists, and it's one of the most valuable tools we have for approaching truth. The challenge is knowing what it looks like and how to recognize it. Genuine objectivity is not about pretending you have no perspective. It's about being aware of your biases and actively working to counteract them. A truly objective thinker acknowledges their own limitations, seeks out evidence that could prove them wrong, and adjusts their views when reality demands it. History gives us examples of this. Think of scientists who have overturned their own theories when confronted with contradictory evidence, or journalists who've corrected major errors publicly despite reputational cost. Their objectivity isn't in claiming detachment from all emotion or ideology, it's in their commitment to intellectual honesty over personal comfort. In practice, genuine objectivity involves rigorous methodology, transparent sources, reproducible results, and a willingness to subject conclusions to independent scrutiny. It also means being able to distinguish between what is uncertain and what is settled. A good climate scientist will tell you where the data is rock solid and where more research is needed, without giving equal weight to unfounded claims. Real objectivity doesn't hide behind the middle ground. It follows the evidence, even if it leads to an unpopular or politically inconvenient conclusion. The paradox is that genuine objectivity often feels less neutral than false objectivity, because it's willing to name what is true and call out what is false. Chapter 6: The Social Cost of Choosing Sides. Choosing a side, especially when the evidence is clear, should be a mark of integrity. But in practice, it often comes at a personal cost. Our culture rewards the appearance of open-mindedness, yet punishes those who commit openly to a position. This is because taking a stand forces others to confront their own beliefs. When you declare that one side is wrong, you implicitly challenge those who support it. People respond not just with disagreement, but with defensiveness, social distancing, or outright hostility. Journalists who refuse to give equal airtime to falsehoods are accused of bias. Scientists who publicly state that certain debates are settled or branded as political, even friends and family may begin to see you as one of those people, no longer neutral, no longer safe. The irony is that many who cling to neutrality do so precisely to avoid this social fallout. By saying, "I'm just seeing both sides," they sidestep conflict and preserve relationships. But in doing so, they may also preserve the very injustices or falsehoods they claim to oppose. History honors those who chose sides when it mattered, from abolitionists to suffragettes to whistleblowers. Yet, in their own time, these figures were often vilified, ostracized, or silenced. Choosing truth over comfort almost always means giving up some form of social safety. The question is not whether taking a side will cost you something. The question is whether neutrality will cost even more, not to you, but to the truth itself. Chapter 7: How Balance Can Distort Reality. In theory, balance means giving fair consideration to all credible perspectives. In practice, it's often a numbers game, matching one voice with another, regardless of the quality or credibility of their claims. This is how fringe ideas gain legitimacy. If 100 experts agree on a fact and one contrarian disputes it, balanced coverage places them side by side as if the disagreement were equal. The audience walks away believing the truth is still uncertain, even when the evidence is overwhelming. The media industry has perfected this distortion. Under pressure to appear impartial, outlets will frame settled science, historical consensus, or verified data as one side of the story. This not only confuses the public, it actively reshapes reality in the collective mind. Take the climate crisis. For decades, major networks featured climate scientists alongside industry-funded skeptics in the same segments, giving the false impression of a 50-50th debate. The damage was profound. Years of delayed action, billions in continued fossil fuel profits, and a public unsure of who to trust. Balance becomes even more dangerous when the stakes are moral, not just factual. When genocide, systemic racism, or human rights abuses are treated as debates between two sides, the media effectively elevates the legitimacy of oppression. True balance requires weighing the credibility and evidence behind each position, not artificially leveling the field. But the performative version of balance prioritizes optics over accuracy. And in doing so, it quietly replaces truth with symmetry. Chapter 8: The Economics of Neutrality. False neutrality isn't just a cultural habit, it's a business model. Media companies, political institutions, and even nonprofit organizations have financial incentives to appear above the fray, because controversy can alienate part of their audience, threaten funding streams, or scare away advertisers. In news media, neutrality is often a product to be sold. Networks promise fair and balanced coverage not because it produces the most accurate journalism, but because it attracts the widest possible demographic. A show that openly takes a side risks losing viewers who disagree. A show that seems neutral keeps both sides watching and keeps the ad revenue flowing. Corporations play a similar game. Publicly committing to one side of a contentious issue can spark boycotts or backlash, so many opt for vague, feel-good statements about understanding all perspectives while avoiding concrete action. The appearance of neutrality helps them maintain consumer loyalty across conflicting demographics. Even academic institutions can be influenced by this economic calculus. Universities reliant on corporate donors or government funding may avoid taking strong stances on controversial issues, framing it as protecting academic freedom when, in reality, they are protecting their income streams. This economic scaffolding ensures that false neutrality is self-sustaining. When truth is bad for business, the incentive is to keep everything looking like a debate, to stretch uncertainty, amplify dissenting voices, and frame facts as opinions. The result: the market rewards ambiguity over clarity, and profits quietly replace public good as the guiding principle. Chapter 9: Escaping the Neutrality Trap. If false neutrality is so deeply embedded in our media, politics, and culture, how do we break free? The first step is recognizing when neutral isn't actually neutral, when it's serving the interests of power rather than the pursuit of truth. Ask yourself, who benefits if this issue is seen as still up for debate? Is the so-called other side grounded in evidence, or just in rhetoric? Does this framing delay action on a problem that is already urgent? Awareness is the foundation, but action is the test. Escaping the neutrality trap often means being willing to look biased, not because you've abandoned fairness, but because you've committed to reality. That means naming lies when they're lies, even if it offends those invested in them. It also means demanding better from institutions. Support media outlets that prioritize accuracy over false balance. Pressure your representatives to act on evidence-based consensus rather than manufactured controversy. And in your own conversations, resist the urge to smooth things over when doing so would bury the truth. Breaking the trap requires a shift in how we see conflict. Disagreement is not inherently bad, it's a sign that someone is challenging the status quo. The goal isn't to silence dissent but to filter it through the lens of evidence, so that unfounded claims don't drown out reality. Escaping false neutrality is not about becoming partisan, it's about becoming principled. Chapter 10: Choosing Truth Over Comfort. In the end, the battle against false neutrality isn't just about media ethics or political reform, it's about personal courage. Truth will rarely be the most comfortable position in the room. It will challenge relationships, threaten reputations, and, at times, isolate you from the majority. The temptation to retreat into the safety of seeing all sides will always be there. It offers a sense of fairness, a way to avoid confrontation, and a shield against accusations of bias. But it also robs you and society of the moral clarity needed to confront real harm. History remembers the people who chose truth over comfort, but it's worth remembering that they rarely felt heroic in the moment. They were often scared, uncertain, and painfully aware of the cost. What set them apart wasn't fearlessness, it was the decision to act despite fear. Choosing truth means accepting the risk that others will misunderstand your motives, question your integrity, or label you as one-sided. But it also means becoming part of the lineage of those who refuse to let convenience outrank reality. Comfort is seductive, truth is demanding. And in a world where neutrality is often weaponized, choosing truth is an act of resistance. Your voice may not change the entire system, but it will change the part of it you touch. And that's how every transformation begins.